All right. Hey, I do not like missing a week of church. I'm very thankful that we're back here today. Let's just start right in. We will pray. Lord, we ask for your blessing now, just the remembrance of why we're here, your great, great love. Bless this time, bless this word to us in Jesus' holy name. So if you recall, Mark's gospel was written after Peter's death, sometime around 64 A.D., and during the persecution of Nero. And Peter's death was one of the motivating factors for why Mark finally wrote down the commission that was given to him by Peter himself. And having Peter's testimony written down in Mark's gospel provided a sense of stability to the early church in a very threatening world. His gospel was a great encouragement to the church now that Peter had passed on, and his gospel, along with the publication of Matthew, proved especially timely because the Holy Land, and Jerusalem in particular, was about to experience the most cataclysmic time it had seen since the destruction of the first temple under Nebuchadnezzar. And the parallels between the time of the first temple's destruction and under Nebuchadnezzar and Mark's gospel are actually striking. Within 5 years of Mark writing his gospel down, the second temple is going to be utterly destroyed, torn down from top to bottom. And it will fulfill what Jesus himself had said in Mark 13, 1-2. As Jesus was going out of the temple, one of his disciples said to them, "Teacher, look, what massive stones, what impressive buildings." And Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon one another. All will be thrown down." And all that was to remain is literally a retaining wall that wasn't even part of the temple. It was to support the mount, and it's what we now know as the Western Wall. And for such a great building, it was inconceivable in the minds of the people that this thing could go away. And not just the Jews didn't think that this building, and it was literally in 2 months' time, when Rome came in, it was completely disassembled. And that paled in comparison to the 50 years that Herod had spent reconstructing it, rebuilding it. And in the past, in the Old Testament, many false prophets had come forward to say that God would never allow the first temple to be destroyed. And of course, they were wrong because he was saying all along that this was going to happen. And that same kind of mindset had set in amongst the people in Jesus' day. And after all, God had literally just allowed the temple to have been rebuilt and restored to glory. And the first temple, Solomon's temple, it was an impressive building. There's no doubt about that at all. But it never made the list of the 7 greatest wonders in antiquity. By the way, that was a real list by real historians of the past, recognized men who created this list of the 7 greatest wonders. And the first temple, it had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar during the years of Jewish exile. And afterwards, 70 years later, the temple was reconstructed by Zerubbabel during the time of the return of the exiles. And this became the so-called Second Temple. And although Zerubbabel followed the footprint of the original temple, this Second Temple was at best functional. By the time of Herod, 500 years later, Herod would look on it and say, it looked like a ruin through wear and lack of neglect and neglect. And he was determined to restore this second temple to the former glory and then some. And when completed, the Roman historian Tacitus said that even those who had seen the greatest monuments of Rome were stunned by this temple's magnificence. Pliny the Elder, another one living at the time, would call the temple by far the most brilliant monument of human genius. Jewish rabbis of the day would say, "He who has not seen the temple of Herod has never seen a beautiful building in his life." And numerous other ancient sources actually referred to it now as the 8th wonder. So it has it has made the list, or simply as the greatest building in all the world. And even Titus, the Roman general, who comes and he's literally going to burn this thing to the ground, originally wanted to preserve it because he was so impressed by its beauty. And by the time of Christ's ministry, although it wasn't absolutely complete at that time, the central part of the temple complex had been completed. And it had been renovated. So by the time of Christ's ministry, it is all that most people living in Jerusalem had ever known. And during the great Jewish festivals in which the courtyard would be lit, it was said to be especially beautiful, so that the sight of the white and gold temple glowing on the hill at night was legendary. And Josephus, a Roman historian, described it. He said that the lampstands threw so much light that there was no courtyard in Jerusalem that was not illuminated by the light of the celebration. And during those festivals, this light that emanated from this courtyard, it was a visceral symbol of God visiting earth, visiting his children upon earth. And it's possible that the memory of those lights is what first came to mind when Christ told his disciples that they were to be a light on a hill. And that's probably the imagery that was in their minds and what Jesus maybe had in mind. And during the great feast, the whole of Jerusalem, it seemed, pressed to the temple courts to stand in its light. But now, as we return to Mark, the opposite is happening. The temple is no longer going to be the central focus for Israel. The light has left the temple courts, and as Jesus retreats from the persecution of the Jewish leaders, the whole world, we find, is now pressing around him, is trying to come to him on the shore of the sea or wherever else he might be found. So let's pick up now in Mark 3, 7-12. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a large crowd followed from Galilee, Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan and the regions around Tyre and Sidon. They came because they heard about all that he was doing. He told his disciples to have a small boat ready to keep the crowd from crushing him, for he had healed so many that those with diseases pressed forward to touch him. Whenever unclean spirits saw him, they fell before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God!" But he sternly ordered them not to reveal who he was. And remember, at this time, we know that the religious elite of Israel had plotted against him. That's where we ended last time, Mark 3:6. The Pharisees went out and immediately began plotting with the Herodians to find a way to destroy him. Nevertheless, the rest of these people continue to pursue Jesus despite their leaders' rejection of him. Why? Because they had heard about all that he was doing. They'd seen everything that he was doing. And just to be clear, these aren't people who believe in Jesus as the Messiah, as a Savior yet. They simply see him as a miracle worker, and they want that. They're not interested in him as the Son of God. They're interested in him for his healing. Even so, they represent those who are not opposed to him, like these leaders, like the Pharisees, the Herodians. Moreover, in following him to the sea, they were also showing their willingness to disregard the same leaders who have now declared it their intent to destroy Jesus. And so we need to kind of ask a little bit here. When Mark says that he withdrew, what does he mean? He withdrew to the sea. What did he withdraw from? Because he's still surrounded by all these crowds of people. What's he withdrawing from? And why does Mark suddenly drop the name, the Sea of Galilee, which he has used before, and now simply refer to it as the sea? And for Mark's Roman and Gentile audience, the sea was just the lake. It was the lake Gennesaret, was the Sea of Galilee. But anyone of Israel, whenever the word the sea is used, that was never a neutral term. The sea represents a place of chaos, darkness, and even demonic power. In the Hebrew mind, the sea is the realm of Leviathan. It's the deep from which beasts arise, the untamable waters which God alone can still. And by saying the sea instead of the Sea of Galilee, Mark is deliberately evoking that symbolism. So from Psalm 104:67, we read, "You covered the earth with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains, but at your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they took the flight." So the sea, apart from God's hand restraining it, is a destroyer. The seas are the dominion of Rahab, and that's not the woman from Jericho, although that's actually who she was named after. But Rahab is the Bible's code word for the untamable demonic power of the sea. So in Psalm 89, 9-10, we read, "You rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. You crushed Rahab like a carcass. You scattered your enemies with your mighty arm." And from Job 26:12, "By his power the sea is stilled. By his understanding he shattered Rahab." So storms come from the sea, as in Jonah and Psalms. The pagan empires, Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and Rome, they all arrive by sea and the coastlands to invade Israel. Daniel's 4 beasts come up from the sea. That's in Daniel 7, 2-3. And those beasts represent the succession of the Gentile empires that are going to come in and crush God's chosen people. To Israel, the sea was the edge of the world and the realm of the unclean. So when Mark tells us that Jesus withdrew to the sea, he is symbolically placing Jesus outside the ordered world of Israel. He's distancing himself from the Pharisees and their Jerusalem stronghold. Jesus moves to the boundary of civilization itself, the sea, while people from the nations, nevertheless, are coming and streaming around him. And if that seems like a stretch, and if you haven't heard that before, it's going to become much clearer. Just listen as we go along here. Mark has given us a lot of clues. His description of all the people that make up the crowd works in conjunction with this idea. The large crowd that followed were from Galilee, Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan, and the regions around Tyre and Sidon. And what all those regions designate are territories beyond what was held by Solomon at the greatest extent of Israel's expansion. And we know about Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem, but what about Idumea, beyond the Jordan, in these regions, Tyre and Sidon? It turns out that these are very significant for a number of reasons. Idumea, or Edom, was far south of Judea. It's where the descendants of Esau lived. And if you recall, Esau, these were the traditional enemies of Israel. From beyond the Jordan, that would include cities like Perea and the Decapolis. These are on the east side of the Jordan River, meaning largely Gentile territory with a mixed Jewish population. These are the areas that pure Jews, think again, the Pharisees, would look down upon and avoid. Tyre and Sidon were Canaan coastal cities. They are notoriously pagan and wealthy. They've been condemned by multitudes of prophets, including Isaiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Amos. In other words, many of the people listed from all these places now following Jesus are from outside of Israel. That's what Mark is indicating. This is where they're from. Do you see what's happening here? And we don't want to miss Mark's use of the word follow here. A large crowd followed Jesus. Remember that word? Jesus had told the fishermen to follow him, and they dropped everything to do just that. Jesus had told Levi to follow him, and he did just that. And now we have a large group of people from around the entire breadth of Israel whom have now decided maybe they should follow him too. Maybe they should follow him too. There's another deliberate echo of Solomon's fame here as well. From 1 Kings 4:31, 34, and also from Chronicles, we read how people came from all the kings of the earth and from the ends of the earth to hear Solomon's wisdom. And now in Mark's gospel, the cities outside the rule that Solomon had encompassed, are seen coming to the true king, making Jesus the greater Son of David. And it's not just Israel that is gathering around him. It's what ostensibly was the entire known world to Israel at the time. So in a very real sense, all the boundaries that used to define old Israel, they're collapsing around Jesus, or gathering around Jesus. Sinners and tax collectors are welcome. Jews and their former enemies are now welcome. People from the ends of the earth are now welcome. And all of this is happening outside of Jerusalem, away from Jerusalem, apart from the center of power, where it meant everything to be Jewish. And all the while, Jesus is working outside the normative lines. He's working on the Sabbath. He's refusing to fast or to be characterized in any way with the old ways. The new wine has come, and only new wine skins can possibly contain it. And the people, they've tasted this new wine, and they cannot get enough. We're told they are pressing in so hard that Jesus needed to tell his disciples to have a boat ready to keep the crowd from crushing him. He had healed so many that all those with the diseases pressed forward to touch him. And Mark is painting a picture of a ravenous crowd trying to get at Jesus. Remember, back at the house when Jesus healed the paralytic, the crowds were there, but they were still ordered, right? So that an organized effort to reach Jesus, these men who took apart the roof, was still possible. There's no way in this current crowd that they would have allowed for such a thing, because they all want access. They're wanting to touch Jesus. They're pushing upon him, pressing upon him. And in the midst of this, Mark's note about how Jesus instructed his disciple to have the boat ready, that just shows that Jesus he's still in control. He knows how to handle this. He's going to take care of it. But their unceasing desire to get access to him marks a fundamental change in how the crowd is now relating to Jesus versus how they could have ever related to God under the Old Testament, under the Mosaic law. I know we've made considerable amount of Mark's use of inversion, but we got to keep on doing so because Mark keeps on doing so. Under the Levitical system, lepers make you unclean by touching you. Corpses, Gentiles, sinners, all of them defile you by contact, making you unclean. When we come to Mark chapter 5, we're going to read about a bleeding woman who's another throng of people touching Jesus. But under Mosaic law, touching a woman with an issue of blood also makes you unclean. In Mark's gospel, all that gets flipped on its head. When Jesus touches a leper, the leper becomes clean. When a bleeding woman touches Jesus, she becomes clean. And later still, when Jesus touches a corpse, a dead girl will come back to life, and nobody is left unclean. And the crowd in 3:10, they've figured this out. They are seeing this. They've figured it out. They're rushing to touch him because holiness and life flow from Jesus into the unclean. The unclean no longer regulate how others behave. Now it is the other way around. With Jesus, he dictates what the unclean may now do. And what they may now do is join him. For Jesus didn't come to call the righteous. He came to call sinners. He came to call those in need of a great physician. In the Old Testament, people came to the temple to be made clean and whole. But here, Jesus makes people clean, and people are treating his body as the new place where God meets human need. They see him, they recognize that in him, they recognize his authority. In a very real sense, Jesus has replaced the need of the temple in the lives of those who are coming to him. As Luke will later say in Acts 17:27, people were created so that men would seek him and reach out for him and find him. He is not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. Jesus came saying the kingdom of heaven was near, and he meant it literally as well as figuratively, and he displays this in his kingdom power through the healing of many. So when Mark says all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him, he's not just describing a chaotic mob. Mark is declaring the Son of God is on hand. The Messianic age has begun. It has arrived. And even if the people didn't recognize that yet, they didn't know that's the case, what they did know was that he comes bringing healing. He comes bringing healing. It's a prophecy in Malachi 4:2. The Son of Righteousness will come and with healing in his wings. And this is being fulfilled before their eyes. And they see it and they know it. Even if they don't know the full meaning of it, they know something powerful is going on before their eyes. So we've got to make mention of something here now, which goes all the way back to the beginning of Mark's gospel. And it's come up again. 3:11-12, once more we have Jesus commanding unclean spirits to silence. Whenever unclean spirits saw him, they fell before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he sternly orders them to silence. And once again, these demons have correctly identified Jesus as the Son of God. The very title God the Father had used when he said he was pleased with them at his baptism, back in 1:11. So we know right from the get-go as readers who Jesus is. So far, only the demons in Mark know that. But have you noticed that Jesus himself strays away from calling himself that? He doesn't use the title Son of God. Instead, he keeps using his preferred title, Son of Man. And he's done this at these most profound moments of his ministry, like when he is forgiving sins and declaring himself Lord of the Sabbath, Mark 2:10-11. But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, go home. Mark 27:28. Then he said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And in everything we see in Jesus as being very deliberate in what he does. And he's also being provocative with the Pharisees. He could have claimed the title Son of God, and that would have been explosive. Instead, he constantly turns to his favorite self-designation, and instead of Son of God, he regularly reaches for this title, Son of Man. Now, Son of Man was not a humble, everyday expression. It was the mysterious, mystic figure from Daniel 7, the one who looks like a mere human being, yet comes from the clouds of heaven. Moreover, he's described as one who will receive everlasting dominion, and he will be worshipped by every tongue and nation. And all of Israel had been waiting for the coming of this man to show up. It's just that they didn't ever expect him to look like Jesus. So when Jesus, the lowly carpenter from Nazareth, who set out about forgiving sins and declaring himself Lord of the Sabbath, comes claiming this messianic title, the Pharisees have no idea what to make of it. Jesus, who eats with sinners and welcomes the same into his inner circle, subverts every expectation of who Messiah was supposed to be. And there's reason for that. He does it as a foil. He does it to redirect and even to protect the people from their own false understanding of who Messiah was. And as for the Pharisees, it leaves them with some amount of doubting to just exactly what is Jesus claiming to be? What's he claiming? Right? If he claimed to be the Son of God, they already think that themselves, but what does this mean? What does this mean? And even though there was a lot known about the Messiah, the Messiah was actually a mystery figure to the Jews in this day. We know that. And every time the demons shout out, Son of God, Jesus commands them to be silent. In effect, he's disclaiming the title. The demons are screaming because they're trying to expose him. They're trying to force him into a premature showdown. And we don't want to say Jesus ever refused the title Son of God. He certainly did not. What we do want to say is his timetable required a gradual revelation of who he was as the Son of God. And Jesus will not begin to teach on his need to go to the cross for another year into his ministry plus, because not even his closest disciples were yet ready to hear such a thing. So in using the Son of Man, he's using this title, he's keeping the more authoritative Son of God under wraps, so to speak, until his own perfect timing. And when his own perfect timing is made, we're going to learn something else about this title, the Son of Man. And he's no less divine in nature than the more direct Son of God. Because listen to how Jesus revealed himself to John in Revelation. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and on turning I saw golden lampstands. In the midst of the lampstand was one like a Son of Man, clothed in a long robe and with golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace. His voice was like that of the roar of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp, 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. That's who the Son of Man is. So there's no doubt to whom Jesus is referring to. But until the time was right, until he reveals that to John, he uses this title to kind of keep them confused, to hide behind it a little bit until he's ready to reveal himself. He had already challenged the Pharisees with his biting words, "Have you not read?" Right? And they would have read Daniel. They would have known this. But they didn't understand. They didn't understand. And if all the references to the Son of Man had not been enough, the language Mark uses next points directly to another Old Testament figure. So let's read Mark 3:13-19. Jesus went up on a mountain and called those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, to be with him, to preach, and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, whom he named Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, whom he named Boanerges, meaning the sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthai, and this is Levi from the tax booth, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. And what Mark has done here is to use language nearly identical to what we find back in Exodus when Moses went up a mountain. And the similarities continue. When Moses went up to the mountain of God, he was told that he was to return the next time and to bring other leaders of Israel with him. When Jesus goes up the mountain in Mark, he does so to call leaders to him. On Mount Sinai, God gave authority to Moses and to the 70 elders to lead Israel. And when Jesus is on the mountain in Mark, he gives his apostles authority to preach and cast out demons. Under Moses, the Sinai event was followed immediately by instructions for the tabernacle and the priesthood, while in Mark's gospel, the mountain scene is followed by the inauguration of the new priesthood of believers in the apostles. So there's direct parallels here. Where it differs, however, is for Jesus, the priests are no longer a special class of Levites. They are simple believers from all walks of life. They are the new wineskins for the new kingdom. As Peter will say, 1 Peter 2:9, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. And when we put all these things together, it's no stretch to see that Jesus is recreating a new Israel around himself through these disciples who he's now calling his apostles. Mark, by the way, is the only gospel at the calling of the apostles which mentions this mountain. So that just underscores more of what he's doing here. And he does so deliberately to recall Sinai, except it's not Sinai. This time, God begins not on a mountain choked with smoke and fire, to which the people were so filled with fear that they refused to come near. Rather, he begins with choosing 12 very ordinary Israelites who represent the 12 tribes, who are not only unafraid to come to him, but who have already dropped everything and left everything to do so. It's as Hebrews 12:18-24 says, For you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom, and a tempest and a sound of trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further messages be spoken to him. That's what happened at Mount Sinai. If you go back and you read what was taking place when Moses was on Mount Sinai, that scene. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. And then the author of Hebrews goes on, instead, you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant. And this is how the Son of Man rules. His kingdom requires humility. He calls flawed men and women not self-righteous Pharisees. He comes as the Son of Man with his face set towards the cross, not yet on glory, to die as a man. He comes as a man who builds his kingdom through weakness, not military triumph. He comes first not to crush his enemies, to make them into his lawful subjects. That's us. He is new wine, and he requires new wineskins. He comes first as the suffering servant, not the glorious Son of God. Now, regarding this passage from Hebrews, because it's highly relevant for today, but you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God. Zion isn't just a metaphor here. It's our new kingdom yet to come. We should have no problem whatsoever saying God is a Zionist, because Scripture says he is a Zionist. He chose Zion. He loves Zion. He will yet reign from Zion. The church is not the new Israel. The church is the church, and Israel remains beloved for the sake of the fathers. And together, as one bride, we will dwell in the peace of God. When the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, Israel will also be born again under the new covenant that was promised to him by Jeremiah, which, by the way, is the covenant by which we can come to the Lord, namely Jesus, the Jewish Messiah. And when that happens, they will look on him whom they pierced, and the king will return to the very same Mount of Olives to sit on David's throne in Jerusalem, and together we will worship as one the holy God of Israel. You don't have Jesus without Israel. You don't have good news without the Mosaic law. You don't have a new kingdom where the Gentiles are invited to come without the old kingdom promised for God's chosen people, the Jews. It's that simple. So don't let anybody intimidate you. God is and always has been and always will be a Zionist, because his gifts and calling to Israel are irrevocable, just as his promises to his church are irrevocable. And we should praise his holy name. So let's just close now with a couple brief applications. Fishermen, tax collectors, and sinners, these are who Jesus calls to himself to make new. He delights to call ordinary, sinful people, unlikely people, and make them the foundation of his new covenant community. Praise the Lord. Because if he didn't take sinners, nobody would be in. Our past failures and present weaknesses do not disqualify us from being sent with his authority. God is not waiting for us to become impressive before he uses you. He's waiting for you to abandon yourself and follow him. That's his call. To press into him, to be a disciple like this crowd. Are we living today in the kind of wholehearted allegiance that is characterized by how his first disciples left everything for him? Or are we living, like the crowd in Mark 3, mainly drawn to him because they're enamored of his miracle ability? Could we be playing at Judas, planning to later betray him still? One way or the other, the day is coming when redeemed Gentiles, along with a regenerated Israel, together will press in to touch the one true King. And that being the case, we need to ask, what deliberate steps can we take today, this week, to press into Christ right now? In prayer, in obedience, in witness to the one whom we profess to worship. And here's the thing. As wonderful and necessary as it is to worship together as a church, this shouldn't be our primary place of meeting God. Right? It just shouldn't. Jesus Christ, through his gospel, is now the place where we meet him, where he meets our human need. And that doesn't require a building to do that. We're not tied to the temple surrounded by walls. We're a mobile emissary force, supposed to be for good. No, we absolutely need the church. Don't get me wrong. We absolutely are called to be meeting together. Don't get me wrong. We're to be a body pouring out love. But no matter what day or where we are, we first need to run to him and trust in him and his word, in prayer, in the fellowship of his people. In the same way, these desperate people are rushing to him on the sea, pressing in, trying to touch him. That's our goal. That should be our desire in life. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask the servers to come up as we celebrate the Lord's Supper. Lord, you left everything. You are the King of glory. You're God incarnate. You're God before you came as a man. You dwelt in glory and honor, and you left all that to come and save sinners like us. Praise you. You have made yourself available. You tore the curtain from top to bottom. We do not need a temple anymore to worship you. We have you. We have the gospel. We have your word. We simply need to believe and trust and submit ourselves to the goodness of who you are, as proven over and over and over again. God, may we do that well. May we bless your holy name. Amen.